What's up, everybody? It's Alex from Heavy New York. We are back at the Kingsland in Brooklyn, and today we return with Warbringer. Thank you for your time.
Hey, how you doing? Well, I was just napping on the bus. There's nothing going on until it's showtime, really, as per usual. This is day 30 in a row of a 54-day tour with 0 days off, so it is a marathon of survival and grinding.
There you go. Well, that's what thrash metal's all about, right?
One could say that, yeah.
Yeah, there you go. The last time I spoke to you, I didn't even have this camera. I had to make it an audio one, so we evolved quite a bit since 2 years ago.
Now you can see my bedhead and such.
There you go. That was the whole point.
It's the evolution of technology right there.
There you go. So it's been over 2 years now since Woe to the Vanquished came out, and you put out your new single, Firepower Kills. Could this new single kind of like serve as like a preview or a clear representation of what the next Warbringer record's going to be?
There's no single song from the record that could. In fact, it's a pretty expansive record, and we try to make each song have its own like niche and identity. The opener, Firepower Kills, pretty much to come out all guns blazing and sort of as like classic thrash as possible, I suppose. But the record goes all over the place. We have like 3 to 4 songs in the 6 to 8 minute range, so we don't have one like 11-minute behemoth like the last record, but we've kind of taken some of that progressive structure and songwriting influence and the epic qualities and sort of put it throughout the record. And where Woe to the Vanquished had like a real all-out assault of a side A, and then side B opened up, this one more mixes it up between the two sides.
Interesting. So you don't really consider this new record to be a follow-up to Woe to the Vanquished. You think that this record is a complete standout in your catalog?
Well, it is literally the follow-up to Woe to the Vanquished, so I guess I have to consider that, don't I? But we really enjoyed the last record, Woe to the Vanquished, and so we are very much trying to continue in that vein, but, not repeat, rather continue down that path, whatever that may be.
Yeah, of course. I noticed that some of your songs do have like stories or subject matters that you are focused on. Do you need to hear music in order to come up with lyrics, or does like a story ever determine the outcome of the music itself?
This album, actually, Firepower Kills and the last track, which, to be announced, both came out with lyrics first, and actually on Firepower Kills, the verse riff, the under vocal verse riff and the chorus part all were written by me, in fact, in a very basic form where I'm literally humming them because I can't play guitar. But yes, that followed the lyrics, which were come up with like a couple years ago, somewhere during the Vanquish touring cycle. Right. And the other song too, lyrics first. However, most songs, music first. But it's about, the important part for me is that the lyrics and music match. So whatever the song's about, the music has to have some of that in it, and vice versa. That gives the songs a sense of like place and setting and makes them more interesting and makes them stand out from each other, I think.
Interesting. You ever worried that you're going to have like the perfect lyrics and then you get the musical arrangements and it goes like 1 or 2 syllables over everything and it doesn't fit?
Oh, you have to be able to bend and adjust. You can't expect everything to be precisely exactly how you imagined. But I've been doing this, this is our 6th record, and I've always kind of worked in this way because I just do vocals. I'm very active in the writing, but I don't play an instrument. So it's a bit of a paradox there, I guess, in terms of what I'm capable of and not. But therefore, I have to be able to work with the musicians I'm working with. In this case, it's Carlos Cruz and Adam Carroll mainly, and myself as the songwriting team. And we're all very used to working around each other at this point. Some of the songs are like Carlos just comes out with a whole song, and I got to come up with lyrics for it. And he's willing to bend the arrangement if I have an idea, too. We're all willing to bend around each other's ideas if we think they're good ideas for the good of the song overall, and having that kind of cooperative mindset is really key to making things actually slot into place, so you don't end up trying to cram a square peg into a round hole, because everyone's got their ideas, everyone's passionate about their ideas, or we wouldn't be here.
There you go. Yeah. One thing I'm really curious about is, do you like to leave the story or lyrics open to interpretation, or do you try to engage a listener in like a certain story and kind of get them to follow from what you're saying?
Both. Split the difference. If you like, the idea is, from my perspective, is that if you want to get engaged on that level, that there's something actually there to sink your teeth into, and that you're not like, let me read along the lyrics, and you don't get any something else for that it actually has some content and some interesting material there, and that what I'm talking about, like a specific place or time or idea, that if you know it at all, that you'll be able to pick up on it. But by the same token, that if you don't care at all and you don't know it all, that's still a very enjoyable song, and that you still get the feeling. So I focus more on the vibe or the idea or the feeling of something rather than the specific details. And I like this approach a lot more because I think it's taking stories and events. I'm into my historic events and such, and my sometimes like existential philosophy shit gets into my lyrics, but I want it to, I'm not here to write you a book. If I wanted to do that, I would write you a book. These are songs, and they need to be treated as such.
Very, very right. Now, one thing I also noticed that, this is going to be my third time seeing you tonight. The first time I saw you was at the Destruction Jungle Rot tour back in 2017, and then I saw you a couple months later with Dark Tranquillity, which I would say a little bit of a difference. You look like a thrash band and a more melodic death metal band, and now you're playing with Enforcer tonight. Have you noticed a different type of crowd, or maybe even like a different type of reaction to your music depending on the tours you've been on?
I mean, that wouldn't be very surprising, would it? But naturally, to some degree, since no other band is us, or at least we try to keep it that way, naturally, we're not exactly the same as any band we tour with, and nor should we be. That wouldn't be very entertaining, because then there wouldn't be a lot of contrast between the groups. We've played with all kinds of bands, and yeah, the reactions differ, but basically the approach we have is, regardless of what the audience is there for, we're going to go on stage and completely wreck everything in sight. And, I kind of go out with the attitude, well, if you don't think that's cool, fuck off,
I think that's the only attitude to have.
If you don't think, like, wrecking shit, playing a ton of riffs and solos and just shredding live is cool, well, fuck, do I care what you think anyway?
Yeah.
That's how I look at it. So we do what we do. I think, often the contrast between us and other bands is overstated. Like, right now we're touring with Enforcer, and people, like, act as if these are so wildly different, but it's like, dude, there's a lot of, like, speed-picked, fast, aggressive riffs in Enforcers, that a majority of them even. So I don't think it's like, it's this combination that makes no sense or anything. It's a cool contrast, or, and if you like metal, well, you get two different shades of pure metal, and for me, that's what I'm all about,
I think there's more in common with you guys and Enforcer than the other two bills I've seen you on.
Perhaps so. That's somewhat subjective, but I like to, I always want, regardless of who we're touring with, my emphasis on stage is to be the most destructive one, the most vicious and destructive.
You definitely were.
So pretty much I'll try to be that, whether you put us with like a melodic band or with a straight death metal band. It doesn't matter. We'll just try to out-fury everybody, and not out of a sense of animosity towards anyone else, but that's just my personal inner mission. To do that is to be more vicious than any other thrash frontman or band in general that you can see.
Yeah, if you're gonna do a job, do it right.
Or at least, it's never for me to judge that, but that is what I am trying to do very consciously, is flip out harder than everybody and just wreck completely. The band on record, I think, goes in all these directions, and we try to make it very musically interesting, but the band is called Warbringer. I believe in truth in advertising. We're going to blow shit up, every single night.
Of course. One other question I really have for you is, being that I've seen you live before, and it's really like a different experience than simply listening to you. Is there a similar energy that you channel into like your studio or in like the vocal booth as you do in the live presence, or is it a completely separate mind frame altogether?
No, pretty similar, honestly. I don't have to worry as much about physical aspects of performance, but I try, in the vocal booth, I guess you focus more, like you have different concerns, because live, you have like, everything's got to be done in one breath, and in the vocal booth it doesn't. So in the vocal booth, I'm able to do more layering, and usually like, we don't nobody does this. No, we're not just going to like start the song, one take, song done. We're going to go through it and try to get a really good version of every line or every line or two. And it's just about we put it under the microscope a lot more in the studio. Live, then the challenge becomes to get as close to that under the microscope where we had all the time in the world level to make it perfect. It's trying to attain as close to that standard as I possibly can while simultaneously giving a really energetic performance. Okay. So that's been a skill that I've been developing. So live and studio are very much a different beast. Live, like your endurance is a big factor, more so than in the studio. So it's different, but the actual vocals I'm doing are fundamentally pretty much the same.
Okay.
There's some like layers stuff, where we have doubles or like a couple different voices running a bit. An example would be Spectral Asylum from the last record, where obviously we don't do that live because there's one me, so I usually just take the main vocal line. But that's the main difference, really. We don't try to like recreate the studio exactly live. Studio's studio, live is live, and we try to just do the song in the purest form we can with just the band live, pretty much.
Awesome. And the final question I wanted to ask you is, it's my favorite question to ask every artist because it's always the hardest question for them to answer. And especially being that you have such long song lengths on your record, how do you know when a song is done?
Oh, that's not hard to answer. It's kind of when the arrangement and or the concept or story ends. Mm-hmm. So When the Guns Fell Silent is the only one that's really particularly long. In general, this is a band that has songs from 3 to 4.5 minutes. So, we're more typically, especially on our early records, a punch, 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 get out kind of band than anything else. But it's like When the Guns Fell Silent, the really long one. Some people say it's too long, and I'm like, no, it's not. If it wasn't as lengthy as it is, it wouldn't feel like it does, where it's supposed to have that, it's about the end of the First World War. It's supposed to convey that sense of like exhaustion and spiritual desolation that follows when the whole thing ends, and the people that have been through it don't even have like enough spark left in their souls to celebrate it, and they kind of just drift off back to where they came from with uncertainty. And so I think if the song was like 4 minutes, you really couldn't convey that because you wouldn't have been on that really long journey. And it's necessary that it be long. It's like how Lord of the Rings couldn't be a 100-page paperback. It wouldn't be what it is, By the same token, I think something like Shellfire or whatever you wouldn't want an 8-minute version of that now, would you? It's made its point by like 3:50 or whatever it is, where it's short, sharp, and just relentlessly aggressive. So we try to suit the character of the songs. Real like straight burners tend to be shorter because it's like you're burning a lot of fuel very fast, and you have to keep in mind both the energy level of the listener too, because some of these songs are well over 200 BPM, blazing fast, are gonna just exhaust the ear basically, and they're so high energy that you don't want like a 11-minute version of that. So we try to basically, it's based on the song, based on the idea of that song, and where the arrangement goes. And we like to have a lot of those sudden endings. An example of that would be Descending Blade, where there's kind of like a main verse chorus section, like is typical for many songs. But once we go into the middle break and the solos and whatnot, it then, instead of reprising any of the early parts of the songs, goes into something completely different that's a shade faster and more chaotic, and it kind of resolves the story where in the bulk of the song it's from the perspective of like a sniper assassin guy who's hunting down you, the listener, and at the end he realizes that he is being counter-sniped, and it's his train of thought for like the last half second of his life. Wow. So try to put cool twists in and make it structurally different. I think the fast, abrupt end outro verse that is new is sort of a stylistic hallmark or a structural hallmark of the way we do things. Not in every song by any means, but in quite a number of them, starting with Combat Shock on the first record, where a totally new riff enters and kind of ends the song on like a fever pitch of new intensity. Because I never liked reprising third verse, third chorus. I already got it by two, Yeah. So that's me as a listener taking my own tastes into the song.
Yeah, there you go. I feel like the instrumentals, the way you describe your music, it almost seems like that the instrumentals tell the story just as much as the vocals, too.
It's about synergy between the two things for me. So I have to hear something in the music to put it there lyrically, and vice versa. The two matching is highly important to me. That's my. I think Iron Maiden does this quite fantastically in general. You know, the trooper, where are you? You're on a horse, you're galloping. It's pre-modern times, you know. Ace is high, you're flying. Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner, you're on a ship. You know, and the instrumentals will tell you that, I think, just as much as the lyrics, if not more. I think that the picture the lyrics gives you can't be what it is if the instruments don't do that. So synergy between those two things is really key to me, and that's why... That's something I think that makes us, like, how are you different from other thrash metal? That kind of, like, sense of setting and almost storytelling. Not quite the right word, but I'll go with it. I think that is something different. I think that some of the very best of classic thrash metal has that. Like, I think Disposable Heroes is a good example. The riffs sound like machine gun fire, you know, and the lyrics describe like the effects of that on the soldiery and what it means to be a soldier in industrial war. And so that's an example of a thrash song that pretty much everyone knows that I think has really great connection between lyrics and music. And I strive for that kind of connection between lyrics and music myself, because I think that that's just what takes it from being... One of my beefs with a lot of modern metal is like, yeah, all the parts are good, but the song as a whole is like somehow less than the sum of its parts. Yeah. I want my group to be the opposite. And again, this is my aim. It's for the listeners to judge, because I can't if I don't like what I make, then what the fuck am I doing here, you know?
I mean, every guitar solo Randy Rhoads did is amazing, but I think if the song itself, like, that he was featured on was, you know, like, I don't think it would have mattered how good the solo was. So.
Well, good is contextual, right? Yeah. So, like, you stick the Mr. Crowley solo into some other song he made, right? And it wouldn't work as well. Or, you know, Over the Mountain solo is great in the context of the feeling of that song. I particularly like the way that one leads in. For example, you know, so nothing's great in isolation. It's about the sum of its parts, and it's about how all the pieces fit together. Yeah. That's the real magic in songwriting, I think, because, like, it's much easier to come up with like a cool sounding guitar part or drum part, for instance, than it is to weave several of those together into a song. And sometimes the trick is that not every part needs to be a standout on its own. And I think a lot of modern bands,
they try to make every measure count. And
right, and you actually lose something there. My analogy for this is that you have a limit, like imagine a sort of figurative stage, right? And all the musical parts, including the vocals and lyrics, are all on this stage together. You can't put the spotlight everywhere at once, because if the spotlight's everywhere, it's nowhere. Then it's all equally lit. You need to have, you know, so that's why, like, during the verse goes on the, and the chorus usually goes on the vocals, and you'd have, like, the tail of the riff poke out between the gaps in the vocal line. That's where, like, the spotlight moves. Now it goes to a drum fill for a second, lead into the chorus, back to the vocal. Now guitar solo, it's on the guitar. You see my point.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we go, I want to thank you so much for your time today. Great to have you back. Just, you know, you have this new single, Firepower Kills. When can we be expecting the new Warbringer record, if you're allowed to say?
We're looking at February 2020. We're getting some of the nuts and bolts done to get the release finished so we can actually meet that date, because we were still mixing the record at the beginning of this tour. They don't give us a lot of time to do these things the way but we do our best to still deliver a really high quality product, and just because we won't have it any other way. We won't put our name on anything unless we think it's great. That's the least anyone can do for their own integrity, I think.
There you go. Yeah. There you go. You could learn a thing or two.
Yeah. Well, here I am at the glorious The King's Land in New York. Yes. Look at how far it has taken me.
Well, thank you so much, John. Everybody, we are here with Warbringer, new music coming in 2020. This is Alex from Heavy New York. We'll see you next time.